Hey, my name is Leo, and something seriously terrifying is happening to me at my job. I work at a Halloween corn maze, one of those places people go to get a good scare during October. You know, the kind where you walk through dark, narrow paths in a cornfield while actors dressed as monsters jump out at you. It's cheesy, but fun for most people, and it's pretty harmless as far as haunted attractions go. At least, it used to be, but lately something has changed. I've seen some strange things at this job before. People freaking out, running through the maze screaming, some even crying. But what's been happening over the last few nights is different. It's not something you can explain away with smoke machines or jump scares. It feels darker, more real, like the cornfield itself is alive and watching me. Let me give you some background. I've been working at this maze part-time for a few weeks now, just to make some extra cash while I'm in college. I'm not one of the actors who chase people with chainsaws or jump out in clown masks. I work the photo kiosk. You see, at one point in the maze, there's a hidden camera that takes pictures of people as they get scared. It's one of the highlights of the maze. Customers can buy their photos at the end of the night, and most people get a good laugh out of seeing themselves freak out on camera. It's usually a fun job. I get to watch hundreds of pictures of people screaming, jumping, or making ridiculous faces, and then I sell them their snapshots for a few bucks. I've seen everything. Big, tough guys shrieking like kids, groups of friends clinging to each other in terror, and couples hiding behind each other, their eyes wide with fear. It's always a good time, or at least it was. Everything changed last Friday night. It started like any other night. I was in the photo kiosk, doing my thing, printing out pictures, and chatting with customers. The maze was packed, with people constantly coming through. It was around 8:30 p.m. when I got a notification on my computer that a new photo was ready for printing. I glanced at the screen, expecting to see the usual scared faces, but instead, I saw something that made my blood run cold. It was a man, completely dressed in black. He was standing alone in the picture. No group, no friends. He wasn't scared. He wasn't jumping or screaming like everyone else. He was just standing there, staring directly at the camera. His face was mostly hidden by the shadow of his bowler hat, but his eyes, what little I could see of them, were locked on the lens. It was like he knew exactly where the camera was and was waiting for it. At first, I thought it was just a fluke. Maybe he was playing it cool, trying to act tough. But something about the way he looked into the camera felt off. It wasn't just a lack of fear. It was the stillness, the deliberate way he stood, like he was trying to send a message. I brushed it off and printed the photo, figuring he'd come by the kiosk to pick it up eventually. But he never did. The thing is, everyone has to pass by my station on their way out of the maze. I see every single person who goes through, whether they buy a photo or not. But this guy? I never saw him. His picture was still sitting on my counter at the end of the night, unclaimed. I told myself it was nothing. Maybe he just left without stopping by. But it left a bad taste in my mouth. The next night, Saturday, things got worse. It was another busy night. The maze was packed again, and I was running back and forth, printing photos and taking payments. Everything was going fine until 8:30 rolled around again. That's when the second photo came through. It was him. The same man dressed all in black, standing in the exact same spot as before. But this time, he wasn't just staring at the camera. He was smiling. It wasn't a friendly smile, though. It was twisted, almost unnatural. His lips were stretched far too wide, revealing a row of teeth that gleamed in the dim light. His eyes, those same shadowed eyes, were staring directly into the lens, and it felt like he was looking right through the screen, right at me. I swear, it felt like he knew I was watching him. The moment I saw the picture, my stomach dropped, and a wave of nausea hit me. I tried to keep my cool, but I was rattled. I kept looking around, expecting to see him somewhere in the crowd, but he never came to pick up his photo. Just like the night before, his picture stayed on my counter, unclaimed. I told my boss about it, showed him the photos, and explained how I hadn't seen the guy come through. My boss shrugged it off, saying it was probably just some prankster trying to mess with us. But I could see it in his eyes. He was spooked too. He told me to keep an eye out and let him know if it happened again. Sunday night rolled around, and by this point I was on edge. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was seriously wrong. I asked my boss if someone could work with me at the kiosk because I was freaked out, but he said we were short-staffed and couldn't spare anyone. He did say he'd check in on me every hour, but that wasn't much comfort. I tried to stay calm, telling myself that it was just a weird coincidence, that there was a rational explanation for all of this. But deep down, I knew something wasn't right. Around 7:45, I had to use the bathroom, so I texted my boss, asking if someone could cover for me while I ran to the porta potties. He didn't respond right away, which was strange. He's usually quick to answer. Finally, at 8:21, he texted back, saying Alex from the ticket counter would come over to switch with me. When she showed up, I bolted for the bathroom. I didn't want to be out there any longer than necessary, especially with that man's creepy smile still burned into my mind. The porta potties are on the edge of the cornfield, just a little ways from the maze. As I waited in line, I glanced over at the rows of corn swaying in the breeze, and that's when I saw him. The man in black was standing just inside the cornfield watching me. He wasn't smiling anymore. He was just staring. His eyes were fixed on me, and it felt like he was daring me to look away. Panic hit me hard. I ducked into the nearest porta potty and locked the door. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might burst out of my chest. I could feel sweat dripping down my back, and I started shaking uncontrollably. I stayed there for at least 10 minutes, trying to pull myself together, but I couldn't stop thinking about that man. Why was he here? How did he know where I was? When I finally forced myself to leave the porta potty, I kept my eyes straight ahead, refusing to look at the cornfield. I practically ran back to the kiosk where Alex was waiting. She could see how freaked out I was, and I could tell she was worried. She texted our boss, but he couldn't leave the ticket counter, so he told her to stay with me for a while. I tried to act like everything was fine, but I wasn't fooling anyone. After a few minutes, I insisted Alex go back to her post. I didn't want to be the reason the line got backed up, and I figured I could handle a few more hours on my own. That was a mistake. At around 9 p.m., I checked the photo feed again. I was dreading what I might see, but I couldn't help myself. I had to know if he'd gone through the maze again. He hadn't. There was no picture of him, but that didn't make me feel any better. In fact, it made me feel worse. Because if he wasn't in the maze, where was he? That's when I felt it, a presence. I can't explain it, but I knew he was close. I glanced out at the maze entrance, and there he was, standing just beyond the corn, staring at me. His smile was back, wider and more sinister than ever. I couldn't take it anymore. I grabbed my phone and called my boss, my hands shaking so badly I could barely hold the phone. He didn't pick up at first, but after the second call, he answered, and I told him everything. He came to the kiosk immediately, but by the time he got there, the man was gone. Just like that. I was in tears, shaking, and completely freaked out. My boss told me to go home early and said he'd finish the shift for me. I drove home that night, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being followed. Every time I looked in my rearview mirror, I half expected to see that man's face staring back at me. I didn't sleep at all. When I came back to work the next day, I was ready to quit. I didn't care about the money or leaving my boss short-staffed. I just wanted out. But when I went to tell my boss, he pulled me aside and showed me something that made my blood turn to ice. He had reviewed the security footage from the maze, footage that's supposed to show every person who walks through. But when we checked the times from both nights, the man in black wasn't there. He hadn't gone through the maze at all. He shouldn't have been in those photos. I quit that day. I haven't gone back since. But I still see him sometimes in my dreams. And once I could have sworn I saw him standing in the cornfield near my house. I don't know who or what that man is. But I do know one thing. He's still out there, and he's watching.